I think Michigan's going to get boat raced because the talent is just...
Say it one more time.
No.
It's the arrival. I came in the league, went straight for the title.
Intercepted! Rod Moore! And Michigan will win the game! Touchdown! Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvelous!
Hail, hail, Michigan, the champions of college football.
There's nothing quite like the game.
Michigan versus Ohio State.
This is The Rivalry, proud to be part of the Varsity Network from Learfield and sponsored by Elevated Integrity Construction.
It's finally here. It is the week of the game. This is what the Rivalry podcast lives for. Jace, JP, Michigan, Ohio State, garbage-free college football podcast from River Radio Ministries and presented by Elevated Integrity Construction. It is sports talk without all the tangents that you don't need. Oh boy, a lot of college football. For a lot of college football over the weekend. First and foremost,
it was a good thing my family had their Thanksgiving on Saturday, and I missed almost all of it. I'm not bitter at all.
The college football playoff is in upheaval. We'll get to that. We'll start off with a little bit of wheel route. As a reminder, if you're not following on social media at Rival Pod, we were in Columbus covering Ohio State, Indiana this past weekend, and we will be in the Horseshoe for Michigan, Ohio State on Saturday at high noon. On YouTube as well, if you're not watching there, at Rival Pod. Question is, which team will make the college football playoff but doesn't deserve to? Oh, okay. I mean, you wrote these, so I'm going to make you go first because I need a second to think through this one.
Which team
will make it?
Do you think is going to make it? And regardless of a record, anything, you just don't buy into the hype that they are a quality enough team to make that.
Man, okay.
I wrote down two. The one's going to be...
Well, don't take two because I gotta have one too.
The one's going to be recency bias.
Pick one. Pick one.
I am going to go with Indiana. And I know that they're going
Kurt Signetti's about to jump out of a bush somewhere.
I know. And I saw his post game where he said, isn't it obvious? Yes. And it's like, Kurt, no, it's not. We just watched you get thumped by the only team that you've played with a pulse all year.
I will say this. My initial reaction to Indiana making the playoff after the loss to Ohio State was no way. Then I watched SEC teams that I assumed would be in take a third loss in Alabama, a third loss in Ole Miss.
This isn't a do you think they're going to make it conversation.
Do they deserve it? Yeah.
Do you think that you look at this team
and go, yeah, that's a playoff team.
That's a playoff team. Indiana, to me, they showed they're just not there. Congratulations on a good season, a phenomenal season.
There's a gap there.
There was a clear gap between Indiana and a team like Ohio State, where you look at Ohio State, and we were even talking last week, Ohio State with 2 losses, and we're going, they could still get in. Indiana with 1 loss and looking the way that they looked, had it been a close game in Columbus, my answer would have been different. But after seeing what I saw, I don't look at that, and I match them up against other teams that are being talked about, and I just don't see it being competitive.
I feel like against some of the teams that are going to be seeded, let's say 10 through 12, they're in that range. They're in that vibe because there's Ohio State and Oregon as kind of like your tier 1 right now. I would say you've got Texas and Penn State and Notre Dame too, quite frankly, as your tier 2. And then you got everybody else. And I think in the everybody else, Indiana probably fits in there. I don't know.
But do they deserve it?
I don't know. I don't know if they do.
Are they as good? Are they a good enough team to make the college football playoffs?
I don't know if they deserve it. I don't know.
Who would you go for?
Boise State.
Boise.
I have no. If you play Boise State in the first round of the playoff, congratulations, you have a first round bye. Listen, and I was really big on the Ashton Genty Heisman campaign. I still am, by the way. I still am. However, as a football team, every single week that I watch Boise State, it's them coming down to the wire with Nevada.
Yeah,
it's
Wyoming.
Down to the wire with Wyoming, with San Jose State. 3 weeks in a row against just awful teams that they are in a dogfight late in the game. That is not a football playoff caliber team. They will make it because they don't play anybody. Unless they get upset this weekend by Oregon State. It could happen. They're going to go to the college football playoff, and whoever ends up, that's where that 5 seed is so important.
Because whoever ends
up in that 5 spot is going to get to play, in all likelihood, Boise State. Unless Boise State gets the first round bye. And then your second round matchup gets to be Boise State. So that 5 seed could play a 12, and then it could play a 4th spot Boise.
You know who?
Congratulations.
I'm kinda surprised?
Welcome to the semis.
You know who I'm kind of surprised? I thought you were going to say what my second option was.
Who would I say the second?
You've harped on this team for weeks now, maybe the whole season.
Notre Dame?
No, but that would have been I would have accepted. That would have been what I
Notre
would have
Dame's
said.
playing good football right now.
Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with that too.
For almost the same reason as Boise. They've had a handful of games this year that realistically they should have lost.
There's a reason why when we're talking about super conferences, you have the Big Ten, you have the SEC, and you have everybody else. There's no question.
And this season
here.
it's just the Big Ten. You're looking at 4 teams in the Big Ten being in the top 12.
The SEC going into the weekend had a chance to get maybe 6 teams in. It ain't happening.
Then they decided, you know what? We'll pass.
Now they're going to get like 2.
We'll SEC you later and not make the playoffs.
It just means more, unless it doesn't possibly.
Unless it just doesn't.
All right, let's talk about the big one from this weekend, Ohio State and Indiana. Ohio State kind of gets caught with what's become a classic slow start for them.
Yeah.
Where they just... It's like they forget. It's like, oh, right, we're playing it. This happened against Northwestern too, right? This happened against Northwestern last week where it's middle of the second quarter. They're down 7-0. And you're going, what are we looking at here?
It happened against Penn State. That was another one where they drove right down.
Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska was a whole game issue for sure.
For sure.
But like this, if you're going to take anything away from the Ohio State-Indiana game, as good of a win as it's going to end up being, because Ohio State looked completely far and away as a better football team than Indiana, that wasn't true in the first half. The first half, you had texted me.
Quarter.
No, the first half, man. They ended up, it was 7-7 until Indiana forgot how to punt with like a minute and a half to go in that quarter. But Indiana played Ohio State because Ohio State left a lot of points on the table, and just the slow start thing is going to kill them when they get into the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, Curt Cignetti, I was watching his post-game conference after this because, and I want to preface this by saying I love Coach Cignetti. When my team does not play him.
Here's your issue. You love the most arrogant coaches.
I love it.
The most arrogant players.
Love it. The most arrogant. Give me all the
Coach Prime.
Give
Coach
me all
Cignetti.
the cockiness. But when you play me, I literally can't stand it. So I get why people dislike these guys. So I was curious after the game how he was going to respond, because I feel like even with Coach Prime, there's times where he takes ownership and times where he blows it off and says something more arrogant. I wanted to see how Cignetti was going to respond. And to his credit, he took it on the chin. In my mind, he came out and he said, you know what, they played. But even he said, we were lucky to only be down 7 at half. And because I think he realized that 4th and 1 from their own 2, that's a chance that, to credit Indiana's defense, they stopped them. Some of that I think was bad play calling.
Well,
you're looking at that and you're going, that was a missed opportunity for 7.
For sure.
Then you're looking at Will Howard where the interception was thrown. I don't really think it was his fault. It was a tight window, but I still think he got it there.
It wasn't a great pass, but you got to catch it.
But that's another instance where they left points on the board. And had they converted those, and I know you can play if they would have, could have, should have.
Yeah.
But you look at that and that's 2 opportunities. You're looking at a 28-7 game at half. It's already been a blowout.
But that's where I'd say, but for exactly the reason you just said. But you can't though, because the Indiana defense got a crucial interception in the red zone and stuffed them on 4th and 1. So they didn't convert on that, which I mean, at that point, Indiana was playing them well. And then everything kind of fell apart. Yeah. And this is where if you're going to, and this is as much about Indiana as it is about Michigan coming up this weekend. You find yourself late in the first half in a 7-7 game, you're trying to pull off an upset like this, the last thing on earth you can do is to muff a punt at your own 5-yard line. Because essentially, and this does not take anything away from the Ohio State, just offense of an Ohio State team, but in the span of about 5 game minutes, Indiana essentially gave up what was de facto 2 special teams touchdowns. Yeah, it wasn't technically a special teams touchdown. Travion runs it in. That's a special teams touchdown.
Yeah.
Followed by the Caleb Downs one a couple minutes into the half, and it was over. So you went from a 7-7 game to 2 special teams mistakes that gave up touchdowns.
There was so much.
You can't do that. And credit Ohio State also for, at least for the Caleb Downs one. I'm not sure that anyone's can take credit for the first one.
There's so much walking away from this game that I was impressed with, but I'm gonna be nitpicky on 2 things. And we've already kind of hit on the one. The first one being you left 2 touchdowns on the board in my mind.
Yeah, it can't happen.
And while it was fine, while everything worked out great, in a playoff scenario against those top tier teams, you've got to execute when you're that close. A 4th and 1 from the 2, you've got to end up with 7 on the board after that. You just have to.
And here's the thing. This is not going to be rocket science, but this isn't second guessing. This is first guessing, okay? Why in the world are you taking a 4th and 1 snap from shotgun?
Makes no sense.
Make it make sense. And Ohio
You've
State,
got a big body
Ohio
rushing
State's not
quarterback.
the only team that does that either.
Well, and for as much as I've harped on Ryan Day and Chip Kelly for doing this at times, because if Will Howard goes down, the season's done. We've been able to overcome the offensive line injuries. Will Howard going out, astronomically disastrous.
There's no
take him,
there's
put
no
him straight
reason.
under center,
Yep.
push, do whatever you got to pick up a yard, get 4 more downs.
You have Will Howard, you've got
Travion.
Quinshawn, you've got Travion. Like there's no reason that you should be taking a snap from shotgun.
No.
Get under center and either hand it off right away, because what ends up happening is when you take it from shotgun, this is just basic science, right? It takes that much longer for the whole thing to develop. If you go back and watch the play, not only are there now more yards you have to cover, but also the whole play takes forever. It's so slow, and when you've got a banged up offensive line,
any gap at all to be filled on an already, and what makes it worse is the offensive line I thought performed well, but that was opening. That was an opening thing of the game. So I mean, you hadn't really seen what the whole game would play out like, and you have a shaky offensive line. I say shaky, not that they were playing bad, but you have 2 guys that weren't expecting to get in there.
That's the big question mark on the team. Okay,
and so you're looking at that, and you're going, yeah, let's do a shotgun play from
sense.
a 4th and 1 with a line that's a little bit banged up at the moment.
And the guys next to me at press level, we're just looking at each other. And again, they obviously don't know I'm a Michigan guy going, yes, great decision. But I'm sitting there like I was almost infuriated for the folks next to me going, because as a football guy, I'm just looking at this going, this doesn't make sense. There's never a reason to line up in shotgun on 4th and 1, period. There's not one.
The other thing that I wanted to harp on, and you've talked about it many times before too, Davis and Igmanosin.
The Ryan Gosling from Remember the Titans type of culpability.
Absolute liability.
I
saw a stat this weekend where it said something where in 11 games, he has 11 PIs called.
He had 3 on Saturday.
And that is not just other penalties that happened. That was just PIs. And what's so frustrating is I was watching that because I was at my family's Thanksgiving, so I wasn't able to actually watch it live. Jace, being a good friend that he is.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Jace, being a good friend that he is, was texting me updates.
Not only am
unbiased,
not only the week before the game am I in the horseshoe, surrounded by whatever that is. Which, by the way, the horseshoe is great and they're awesome to work with, and it's a good college football atmosphere. But not only am I there, I'm having to text you updates on this game that I don't care about.
It was
with
not
the most
fun.
Objective, just like that was a touchdown for Indiana.
We were in Cincinnati.
GIFs, no memes. It was horrible.
We were in Cincinnati for my family Thanksgiving. It was either, I was given 2 choices. It was either going to be this weekend, like this past weekend, or it's going to be next weekend.
Well, that's not going to happen.
And if you thought there was a single universe that existed where I was not going to be at the shoe this upcoming Saturday for the game, you are out of your mind. So I said, I will miss the Indiana game. I will figure out a way to get score updates. I even talked about buying a DVR so that I could mute every notification and then watch it later. Jace helped me out. He was sending that. But Davis and Igmanosin.
Yeah.
To me, and you were there, and I had asked you this question. It feels like there's a lot of times this season where drives get extended solely because of him.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the tape, and even this weekend, the very first one on that opening drive, if he just turns around, he can make a play on the ball.
For sure.
There's not even a need.
And
there's not even a need for it.
I don't know on the first drive that I'd say it got, because you had asked me.
But he had 2 of them on that drive.
He did, but you had said it's particularly on the second one. Well, were they going to did that extend the drive and give them? It's like Indiana was moving the ball okay. They were doing fine.
But that first one, wasn't it a 3rd down?
No, I don't think so.
One of them I thought was, but maybe I'm thinking later in the game.
Regardless, though, you're exactly right. Where this is not just sometimes he gets a little handsy. It's like that's his only move. Mm-hmm. His only move is to grab the jersey.
That I've seen where people are like, "This is the only option," and it's him with taped clubs on his hand, so that he can't grab. And honestly, do it.
And again, that's what we expected from Indiana in this game. And Joel Klatt laid this out really well because the man knows what he's talking about. By the way, watching Gus Johnson chow down on some scrambled eggs walking through the press box will never not be funny to me.
Amazing.
But one of the things
is that a flex? You just flex.
Yeah, a little bit.
You've seen Gus
A
Johnson
little bit, man.
eat scrambled eggs.
Weird flex.
Weird, but
okay.
all right. I'll ride with you.
One of the things that Klatt laid out was that Rourke was going to understandably target the corners. He was going to target Burke because Denzel Burke has not played super well this year. He's very talented, but he has just not had the year he hoped he would. Igbinosun's a liability. I'm not sure that Burke is. Burke, I think, is just, he's got the skill set
Ever
at least.
since he had that really awful game
just
against
looks
Oregon,
off.
he looks in his own head at
Igbinosun doesn't
times.
look like he knows what he's doing out there. And I say that as someone who's watched Michigan have freshman corners try and cover guys. Where you'll see guys like Jair Hill. And by the way, if you're a Michigan guy, Jair Hill is going to be real good. But there are moments where Jair Hill looks like a freshman. Igbinosun doesn't have that excuse.
No.
Where Jair Hill will either get a hold of somebody or he'll just get beat on a double move. You're going to see it on Saturday. Come to accept it by now, okay? But for Igbinosun, you're right. He's got to just turn and look. That's all he needs to do.
Times. There was literally, it was on Twitter that I saw this. Somebody had actually taken the time to go through and pick every single one of the clips of him getting a PI. And no joke, like over half of them, if he just turns to the ball, it's a pass deflection. It's an interception. He's defending it. No flag is being thrown. It's there. I don't know what you have to do to get him to change from that at this point.
And I've said this, if not all year, I've said this at least since the Oregon game, where Ohio State secondary does not scare me. It would help if Michigan had a quarterback who could throw the ball downfield. I'd be a lot more excited about this. But when we talk about looking at Ohio State presumably going to the playoff, that secondary, I think, is going to be the Achilles heel for this team. I know there's a lot of talk about the offensive line, and I think that's part of it.
But the thing is, with the secondary, you've got the talent. You can see the talent all across the board.
For sure. Listen, this is a $21 million in NIL offseason to pull this roster together. The talent's there, but why isn't the execution at least in the secondary?
And I think it started to, there was other
stuff.
stuff.
All's well as ends well, I suppose, if you're in scarlet and gray.
And those were the two things that I wanted to be a little bit nitpicky on. But other than that, it was a dominant victory. The thing that I'm always impressed on, Ohio State was held scoreless in the first quarter. In the second half, or they scored on 5 of their 9 possessions total. They left what I would consider, 2 on the board. The defense was the best I've seen it all season. I thought they played really, really well against Penn State. The stuff that I saw them designing, like the actual play calls, the concepts of the blitzes, the way they were using Jack Sawyer and JTT. Honestly, even Cody Simon, we gave him love a couple episodes ago.
Cody Simon played very well.
The most underappreciated. I think he had 2.5 sacks, a critical fumble, and that's unblocked. And
that's going to be, and I'm not going to, I don't want to delve too far into the game because we'll get to that here in a little bit. A lot of the game plan that you saw Ohio State run out against Indiana is going to be what you're going to see on Saturday against Michigan, where it was just pin your ears back and say, I don't think you can block us. And and again, not to go too far into the game, that's going to be a problem for a banged up Michigan offensive line who already has struggled and now has had the injury bug as well. And we're just shifting pieces around.
And we've talked about it a handful of times on this podcast, specifically about JTT and Jack Sawyer, where it almost feels like they've never really had a legacy game. JTT against Penn State a couple of years ago, legacy game.
But when it matters most.
When you're an Ohio State fan and you're used to the Chase Young, the Bosas, those guys coming through off the edge, I feel like that was the expectation for both of these guys.
Yeah.
And they haven't quite lived up to that. Are they both above average players? Absolutely.
Yeah,
but they've never had a game-defining, game-changing performance against a top team.
At this point in the season, when now you're looking at Michigan coming in on Saturday, you're looking at a Big Ten, presumably you get through Michigan, you get a Big Ten championship, you get playoff. These are the opportunities that these guys have not shown up in because they either haven't had the opportunity in postseason or they haven't been able to get through Michigan and do it against their biggest rival.
And this past weekend is what I think a lot of Buckeye fans expected out of them all season long.
Agreed.
And they've had great seasons. And so I was glad to see that. Cody Simon, honestly, James Laurinaitis, the linebacker coach, former Ohio State player, deserves a lot of credit for what he's done with the linebackers. I still have
nightmares from my childhood about James Laurinaitis.
I love the animal. Yeah. The animal's just amazing. James Laurinaitis has done a phenomenal job with the linebacking group. I feel like in recent years, that last year I really liked that group with Steel Chambers, Tommy Eichenberg. I think this year they feel more of what a silver bullet should be. Those were good players.
It felt better.
Those were good players, but I felt like a lot of times in coverage, that's where their weaknesses kind of showed. They were the big kind of not as quick. Steel Chambers was probably your best bet there, but now you've got Sonny Styles. You've got I can't even think of his Cody Simon. I was trying to think of his name. Cody Simon coming in there.
And I would still say, I don't think that any of those guys inspire fear. I say Cody Simon has played a heck of a season. I don't know that there's anybody there that I go, well, man, that's a high draft pick type guy. But we're talking about as a unit. This is the best unit that Ohio State has had in a while.
I think it's because it finally fits the modern football era. I think,
for sure.
Like last year, Tommy Eichenberger was a great player. Steel Chambers was a great player. Also, S-tier football names for linebackers.
Correct.
But they were the slower, just kind of grittier guys.
Yeah.
These guys, Cody Simon is a beast.
Yeah, Cody Simon is the one guy that I would go, yeah,
they're quick.
That man is a problem.
They're quick and they're hard hitters. And they've really advanced. Like nowadays, to be a linebacker, you got to be a little bit slim. You got to be a little bit more athletic than what the old days used to be.
If you're Ohio State, you got everything you wanted out of that game, minus the things that you already mentioned, minus leaving some points in critical moments. Can't happen this weekend if you're a Buckeye. Can't happen either way this weekend, no matter who you're cheering for. Igbinosin continues to be an issue, and we'll see it. You know, I have questions about whether or not that will matter on Saturday, but moving forward, that's certainly going to be a problem. And by the way, who knows? You know, who knows? Maybe Michigan does throw the ball a little bit more and says, well, that's one way to move it downfield, you know? And
your
and
offensive
also,
game plan is where's Davison Igbinosin on the field?
Honestly, better than some of the Kurt Campbell game plans I've seen.
Better than leaving Davis Ward up to decide.
And I think if you're Ohio State, you can't start slow. Like you've got to you don't want to do too much. But you also you can't start slow like that. You can't let teams like Michigan hang
around. And I think this is a game, and we'll talk more in depth about it after we break down this past week for Michigan and stuff. But I think this is the game, and you even saw that shift in post game where there's numerous clips going around where and I want to speak on this a little bit before I even get to that. But people were talking about Will Howard after the game, and he was up there at the podium speaking, and he accidentally said the team's name, and then he immediately apologized, and he got up there and said, yeah, I know. I mean, I feel it. I've never been a part of this game, but all my teammates came back for this reason. I feel what it means in that locker room. And that's the difference between this year and last year. Last year, you had our quarterback going in there saying, well, it's just another game. And it's sure as heck not. And so now you've got...
Here's the thing, though. Like, how much does that matter?
I think it does. I think it does.
And hear me. I believe that it matters as far as, like, it matters how you approach the game. But the issue for Ohio State over 21, 22, 23 has not been, well, we just didn't take it as seriously as we needed to. That's not been the problem. That's not been the problem. But what you want, I would agree. What you want is you want your quarterback to be talking like that and be aware of the situation. And I think you've
seen that shift where at the beginning of the season, everybody's like, well, was Will Howard a big enough upgrade from Kyle McCord? And I think the answer is an absolute 100% yes. Even if you're going solely off attitude, which is what I think I had even said at the beginning of the year, because you go into Happy Valley and he says the quote, I don't know what it was word for word, but basically they didn't want me.
They didn't think I was good enough. I guess we'll find out.
I guess we'll find out. I thought he played a great game. Then you go and afterwards he's saying it's Sad Valley now. He's showing a little bit of the cockiness. Then you go in and this week against another big game, he goes in there, has another great game. Then he goes in and he's on the sidelines.
Extinguishing a cig and stuff.
Saying Google that. And you know what? I love it. That's what I want as my quarterback, as a leader. I want somebody that's going to have a little bit of a competitive edge because that's the most important position.
And yet, now is the time to back it up.
100%. And I think so far this year he has.
I would agree. But this is where, and this is where we're getting into it's rivalry week, okay? Yeah. This is where for years my complaint has been looking at Ohio State, looking at Ryan Day hanging 100 on teams. And in 22, it was Heartline saying, the way that they've talked about our coach, what's done in the dark comes to the light today, to get blown out at home.
Well, and I think
like at some point, you need to see more than talk from your coaches and your players, and you need to get the job done.
I agree with part of what you had said earlier about Ohio State didn't lose that game the past 3 years because they weren't taking it serious. Although I would say last year, I don't know how, and this isn't me saying Kyle McCord didn't take it super, but the phrasing of how his mindset seemed to be would lead me to believe that on his part, he didn't prep any harder than he does on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, and
there's no way to prove that.
Because you've also got guys in there like Marvin Harrison. You've got like here's the thing. These guys, current rosters, current coaching staff, they know what this game means. The issue is not, and I think there was some argument even during the Brady Hoke era where it was like, well, Brady Hoke is not, I don't know if he really gets the rivalry. Sharon Moore gets the rivalry. Ryan Day gets the rivalry. Their assistants get the rivalry. These players get the rivalry. This is what college football is all about. And yeah, somebody's going to go home sad and somebody's going to be elated. This is why you play college football, is for games like this. Before we jump into that, we've also got to talk about Michigan Northwestern. But first, maybe you feel a little bit like Kalen DeBoer in Alabama.
How good does it feel that you get to switch this up?
I love that I get to rewrite this every week, and I love that Alabama's part of this now. You know what you're doing isn't working, and you need to transfer in some help. Our friends at Elevated Integrity Construction are the portal to a successful project. Aaron and his team have been doing this a long time. They'll communicate openly, honestly, and leave you wowed at the finished project. Home, church, or business build, go with the folks with integrity in their name. ElevatedIntegrity.com. We're also really excited. The Rivalry Podcast is part of the Varsity Network, powered by Learfield this season, a must-have app for every college football fan. Free to download in the App Store and Google Play Store. Enjoy live college football games and podcasts just like this one. Search for your school for tailored content, or search for the Rivalry Podcast in the Varsity Network app. And then don't forget, as we head into Black Friday, the holiday season, you're looking to do a little bit of merch shopping for your favorite team. We've got merch. Not this one. This is if you're an Ohio State fan, look close. This is the Big Ten Championship Trophy. You haven't seen that for a while. Are you? It's been a bit.
We're familiar.
But you can go online, rivalpod.com, click support. You can look at our shirts. You can also just throw a little bit of money our way. Let's be honest. You can just throw money at us and go, hey, love what you guys do. Help support us. Ohio State's obviously got a good shot at the postseason. Small budget podcast. Every little bit helps. Rivalpod.com. We've also got photo dumps, articles, and a whole bunch of other fun stuff at rivalpod.com and across social media at rivalpod. Michigan put together absolutely their most complete game of the season on Saturday. And, we were talking before we hit record here, and I said, the competition is what the competition is, play Northwestern. But also, I'm not sure that the competition is that far off from what Michigan is this year either.
And after what you've experienced this season as a Michigan fan, games like this we'll take it. After the offensive outputs that you guys have put up all season long, you've had moments where the defense has really shined. You've had bright spots on the offense, but to see this team come out and genuinely walk away feeling like we played to our potential.
Well, and that was
just feel good.
That was a complete game, right? Like, among the many things that have gone wrong this season is even in games against teams. So USC is the quintessential example, right? USC and Minnesota in particular, where Michigan plays phenomenal first half, maybe even 3/4 of football, and then just falls off a cliff. This was the first time that Michigan has played a complete game front to back. They looked like, they were clearly the better football team, and they looked like it. And for an offense that has struggled, is putting it mildly, for an offense that has struggled to hang 50 points on another college football team.
On their season total is 50 points.
Like, this is when you need so much to go well for this weekend. That's the type of momentum that you need for this weekend. That's the type of belief. That's the type of everything kind of gelling at the right time. The defense played fantastic. Michigan remembered Kalel Mullings is on the team. It's amazing. It's just listen,
when you seem to get
I understand that this podcast is often low hanging fruit analysis. Handing the ball to Kalel Mullings equals good things happen. Who could have predicted this? Me, every single week. And yet, even in that game, the usage was kind of all over the place. But anytime that Mullings was on the field, good stuff happened. Now, I will also say, I think part of it is also game script. At some point, you're going, we're going to get a whole bunch of other guys in here. Jordan Marshall had a bunch of carries.
Jaden Davis got on the field for the first time all season.
Can we just talk for a second about Jaden Davis making an appearance and handing the ball off to Tavier Dunlap, who then just rumbles in to score? True freshman handing the ball off to a senior for his first touchdown. It's pretty good. Do I understand why Jaden Davis is on the field there? I don't know what he's doing on the field other than that might be the only time you see him in a Michigan uniform.
Ooh, spicy.
I mean, Michigan, we'd be remiss not to mention Michigan wins the Bryce Underwood sweepstakes.
For now.
Okay. Michigan wins the Bryce Underwood sweepstakes. And so, there's a lot of question about what does that mean for Jaden Davis? I have no idea. I have no clue. You would assume he's probably going to transfer.
Yeah, there's the same speculation with Tavian St. Clair and Aaron Noland from this year with Julian Sane and the whole.
But also,
both teams. But also,
who knows? Because here's the reality too: is if Michigan's quarterback room has taught us any lesson this year, it's that you can never have too many talented quarterbacks on a roster. Okay, just because you never know what you might end up with. Regardless, so Michigan plays a really good game. Davis Warren played a really good game through one bad decision. Through a terrible interception. That is also, though, his first turnover since he won the starting job back, which is a good sign because that was obviously the big knock against him, and rightfully so. Through 3 games, was the man couldn't stop turning the ball over. He, he's still not a great quarterback, but he played well, and he's played serviceably, which is all you really need from him, to be honest with you. Against Michigan State, against Oregon, against Indiana, and now against Northwestern, with 1 turnover in the mix. That's the type of thing that you want if you are Michigan.
Yeah.
So there's not a ton other than that to say. Michigan played a complete game front to back, which then brings us to the big one, right? This is everything that this is built off of. I want to toss this your way because this is something that we've said on this podcast for years.
Yeah.
That I'm curious what your thoughts are. And I think we probably are in agreement here. The phrase is, when you get into the game, you toss the records out.
Oh, for sure.
How does that strike you, given the state of these programs in 2024?
For sure. And I joke about it all the time on this podcast, and we've probably said it numerous times this season alone about Ohio State's going to go out there and kill them. And they could easily. I mean, there's nothing that's preventing the talent gap to anybody that watches a single second of college football is vast. But that just doesn't matter to me. I've seen enough Michigan Ohio State games in my lifetime where Ohio State's been undefeated or maybe 1 loss on it, and Michigan's come in with 3 to 4 losses, sometimes even more than that.
Yeah.
And it's ended up being a closer game. Teams play harder. The players get up and are more ready. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't.
This year reminds me, because I was trying to go back, number one, the spread is 20.5. Yes. There was rumor that it opened at 23.5. I don't know if it did.
It was 23.5.
The official line right now, we record Monday mornings right before Sharon's presser, which is always good when you've got injury news like Colston Loveland, by the way.
And Will Johnson.
And
I saw something where they said he wasn't going to play against Northwestern. He didn't. So first off, spread is 20.5.
So that tells you what people think about how this game is going to go. In that, so Will Johnson, it sounds like the report is that he's not playing. And there's a couple thoughts there. Number one, if this is a legitimate injury thing, yeah, for sure. If it's not, then it's disappointing because you've got guys and again, we'll find out. I don't know if Sharon will mention this in his presser at the second we hit done recording on this,
like clockwork,
or if we'll find out Saturday. There's question about Colston Loveland. If he's going to
play the whole second half,
he didn't come out of the locker room. I don't really know if that's a precaution. I'm not going to speculate.
At that point,
but here's my point in that though: is you've got if it really is Will Johnson shutting it down for the year for draft stock, I think it's a little selfish. Because you've got Colston Loveland still out there playing, who's going to be a high draft pick.
Don Edwards.
Not even Donovan Edwards, though. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Colston Loveland. These guys are going to be day 1 draft picks. All 3 of those guys are going in the first round. Will's going to go in the top 3 picks. So if it's true that he's shutting it down for the season, it does feel selfish to me. But I'm also going to say this. I'm not going to speculate on that. I guess I'm speculating, but I'm not going to come down firm on that, I should say, because we've got guys at Rival Pod on Twitter who have said, hey, I told you guys this is going to happen. This was going to happen. He's shutting it down. And maybe that's true. But also I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
And I don't know the extent of his injury. So I'm not going to say things like he quit on his team and he packed it in. Maybe he did, but maybe he didn't.
Yeah. And I don't know. Think typically, I feel like I'm one way or another, but this one I really am split right down the middle, 50-50. I get
because if you are battling an injury,
and if it's an injury that you think you could re-aggravate and it keep you out longer, even if you feel like you're good, if there really isn't anything to play for the season, being smart and looking ahead at your future. I totally respect it. I understand it, but I do agree with you.
Like if there's
these are your friends. I mean, this is your family.
If it's just you shutting it down to shut it down, and you could go at 90%, that feels bad to me. If it's like, yeah, I could play through it, but there's a 50% chance I'm fine, a 50% chance I injure it again. Yeah, I don't know about that.
I'm with you. I don't love it, but I get it. I would like to see, especially for the game, I would love to see a sense of pride come over and be like, well, we've not lost in 3 years. I'm not going to let my brothers down. I'm going to come out and try and do my best.
And at the end of the day, who knows? The report is that he's not going to play. I assume we're not going to see him, which obviously makes the task for Michigan that much more difficult.
Yeah.
For Colston Loveland, I think that's frankly an even bigger piece than Will Johnson.
Oh yeah. He's been the go-to for your offense.
Because we've not seen Will for so long, that Michigan's had to adjust with Jair Hill. They've had to adjust with Zeke Berry. Zeke Berry is going to be a really good player, but he has those moments where he looks really good, and he's got really bad moments. Jair Hill, same way. Amir Hall, same way.
Mm-hmm.
So, but because Michigan has already had to adjust to that, I think not having Loveland would be just.
Well, he's been Davis Warren's safety net
for sure, and you see that a lot with tight ends, right? Now, the good news for Michigan is Marlon Klein is next up, and he has been really good this year. He's not Colston Loveland, but Marlon Klein has been really good as well. And so the end of the day, on the offensive side of the ball for Michigan, I mean, you're not going to hang 50, but you want to see a similar game plan to what you saw Saturday.
So which
is a heavy dose of run the dang ball.
So give me a recipe. 3 things Michigan's got to do in your mind to pull this upset.
Yeah. Cause there's no doubt, right? Like we're not going to beat around the bush. Like the betting line says Michigan is going to get boat raced.
I think you ask 10 people who they think.
I've told you, and I'll make my prediction here in a moment. I think Michigan's going to get boat raced because the talent is
Say it one more time.
No.
I'll listen to this on loop. It's fine.
I've said it enough. But like, that's not shocking analysis for anybody, right? You'd have to be the homer of homers. You'd have to be Desmond Howard on College Game Day.
You'd have to be me
to pick Michigan. You'd have to be you in the opposite situation. So here's what I've said for a few weeks now. Is that I've said there's a path to victory for Michigan. And I've used the analogy and said there's a path to victory. The path is covered in poison ivy and razor wire, but there is a path to victory for Michigan. It's going to have to be, number one, you're going to have to heavily rely on that run game. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that all you do is hand the ball off. I thought Michigan did a good job on Saturday against Northwestern of working in some safe, comfortable passes. You're going to have to do something to get them from just stacking the box. Yeah. But Khalil Mellings had 3 touchdowns, and it was just, there was a lot of let's keep him from stacking the box, and then we're going to hand off, and you just bludgeon people as you move forward. Mm-hmm. That's number one. That is the number one path for Michigan. Number 2, the defensive line, right? For all the things that Michigan does not have, what they do have is probably the nation's best defensive line. Josiah Stewart, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, that wreaking havoc on the Ohio State run game, potentially, or causing Will Howard and forcing him to have to get rid of the ball quicker than he wants to. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a critical piece of this for Michigan. That's something Indiana did not do. Ohio State did not run the ball particularly well against Indiana.
I mean, they averaged 4 yards a carry.
They had 115?
Yeah.
That's not great.
4 yards a carry.
It's not great.
4 yards a carry.
But also Indiana's defensive line isn't Michigan's. And so for Michigan, that defensive line pressure is kind of the no-brainer.
However,
this is going to have to be the way that you do this.
Indiana did have, if not one of the top rushing defenses.
They did, and that's fair. So I think those 2 things. And then the third thing is Michigan's going to need a little bit of luck. Let's be honest. Michigan's going to need +2 in the turnover game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And again, none of this is rocket science type stuff, but if you're Michigan, this is what you're going to need. You're going to need to run the ball well. You're going to need to disrupt Ohio State's offensive line. That offensive line is still kind of pieced together. You've got a really good defensive line. That's going to be a huge matchup for determining how this game goes. And you're going to have to get a little bit lucky, but or just, you're going to have to create a couple turnovers. Mm-hmm. If you can do those things, then yeah, you've got a path there. I just don't know that Michigan's got enough. I just don't know. Even if some of those things happen, I just don't know if Michigan's got enough unless all three of them.
What's your score prediction? What do you got?
What's the spread? 20?
20.5.
Yeah, I think they cover.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. I think you may see this one be still, this will still be a game at the half, but I think Ohio State pulls away at the end. I've got them 38-16.
We're somewhat close again.
At the end of the day, I mean, Ohio State in 2024 is alongside Oregon. We mentioned this earlier, a top tier program in 2024.
It's Oregon and Ohio State and then everybody else.
And Michigan is just not playing well. Maybe they take some of the momentum from Saturday and they turn it into a little bit of magic. I just don't think they're going to have enough to do it.
I'm right there with you. My final, and I'll give why after. Ohio State 38, Michigan 10. I think
right in that same realm.
Yeah, if there's one thing that I can rely on with this Ohio State team, it's they're going to put up points. The offense has been extremely efficient all season long. I trust them to be able to go and score. While I agree with you about Michigan's defensive line, I don't think the secondary is going to be able to handle the receivers that Ohio State has.
And I think that's true.
I think anybody, and I would say this to anybody in the country, guarding a guy like Emeka Ibuka, guarding a guy like Jeremiah Smith is a darn near impossible task.
Yeah. And Carnell Tate's been playing well too.
Carnell Tate's right behind.
If you don't have your All-American corner, I mean, at some point there's too many weapons.
In the past couple of weeks, even G. Scott's been playing a little bit better. He's been getting some touches in.
I think G. Scott is the least concerning of those four receivers.
Say that, well, for sure. But then you've also, I think the running back room's going to shine again. I really love. There was one thing that stood out to me while I was researching stuff leading into today's episode. Travion doesn't even have 100 touches on the year. He is just, which we talked about it a couple episodes ago.
About the fresh legs.
Having fresh legs is going to be so huge for games like this, for games in the playoffs, for a Big Ten championship, anything like that. Having a guy with the talent level, the explosiveness of a Travion Henderson, and he's not even touched the ball 100 times this year, is going to be huge. I think the one thing that had given me concern is the defense. And this is more speculating that I'm going to hope they're putting their money where their mouth is.
The Ohio State
defense, sorry.
Okay. Talk to me about that.
Yeah.
Where's that a concern?
So
have you seen our offense?
Well, so that's what I'm saying, because we've talked about how they've had a slow start, even against Marshall to open up the year. They let them drive down the opening drive. Yeah. They've had moments where, not that they've like slacked off or anything, but they've had moments where they've had a slow start and it's taken them a little bit to get into the game. Almost every single one of the people that we signed through an NIL deal to return that should have went last year came back with one reason. First off, whatever the check that was being written sure helped. But let's talk about the elephant that's in the room.
Came back for two reasons. Number one, that check right there.
I would say number one, though, is for this game.
For sure.
I think the taste in their mouth from the past 3 seasons is bitter. I think it's lasted. And I think you're going to see that defense come out with some fire.
Yeah.
Just like you saw them against Indiana. I think that attitude is going to really help that defense to lock down an already atrocious offense.
Yeah.
And I just think the firepower is too much. I say 38 to 10. Too. I think one of those touchdowns for Michigan, I think the touchdown at Michigan is late fourth quarter. Who really gives a rip? We've got Julian Sain already in the backfield getting some extra reps in.
I don't think you're going to see any backups in this game, man. Like, this is the class.
I hope not.
This is the Woody Hayes thing, right? Why'd you go for 2? Well, because I can't go for 3.
Yeah.
Like this is, not that game, but I even think about last year where Michigan was beating up on Michigan State. It was like 42-0. And there's 10 seconds left and Michigan snaps the ball anyway, hands it to Alex Orgeron and says, yeah, go punch it in again. Mm-hmm. Michigan hangs 49 on them. That's the type of mentality when you get to rivalry games.
I hope it is.
I mean, and again, the reality is, like you said at the beginning, like there is an element where you throw the record out.
And here's the thing.
And so, like, if you're Michigan, you're obviously this is not the position you want to be in, but this is the position you find yourself in, right? Massive underdogs. Mm-hmm. Nobody gives you a chance. There is no pressure on this team except for the pressure of winning this game, which is always that penultimate thing.
And here's the other key for Michigan that I think could help them, because Ohio State, you're not ignorant if you're a player for Michigan. You know why Jack Sawyer and JTT and Denzel Burke and Lathan Ransom and all those guys came back. And you know the expectation from around the world that they think you're just going to go out there and get destroyed. And so coming into that game, as it always is, emotions are going to be running high. Yep. I think if I'm Ryan Day talking to the Buckeye team this week, I'm telling them the one thing that Michigan thinks they can beat you on is the mental game. They're going to try and get in your head. They're going to try to do some extracurricular activities on the field. Not anything dirty, but there's going to be a little bit of extra shoving, a little bit of trash talking, as always. But they're going to try to get the Ohio State players to take the bait a little bit, to pick up some extra penalty yardage, to maybe get a personal foul call, any little thing like that to extend a drive, or to hurt.
Maybe so, but here's the reality though, is I think a lot of the mental game starts with Ryan Day. I mean, the man has lost 3 years in a row. We said coming into the season, before we really knew how much of a disparity there was going to be between these programs in 2024, that he was coaching for his job this year.
And it's still true.
At 20.5-point favorites against Michigan, you're coaching for your job on Saturday.
If Ryan Day loses this game, we said it before, but we'll say it again.
He's gone.
He can't even be allowed back in the locker room. He's
gone. Playoffs are gone. Like you ain't making the playoffs with two losses and a loss like that. But I think a lot of it starts with him, because for years now we've said he gets in his own way in big games. And to this point this year, he's not done that. He's overall, not perfectly, but overall, he's been more aggressive in appropriate ways. He's made smarter decisions. I think from a coaching standpoint, you can be happy with that. But now here comes the big one. This is the monkey on the back of the Ohio State program. Jim Harbaugh had this for years, right? Where it's like, I can't get past it. And once you get that off, it opens everything else back up. Ryan Day's now in that position. This is the monkey on the back. And so the mental game side of things starts with him, where if you go in there, and this is what I mentioned earlier, if you you can't start slow. But if you go in there and you try to do too much.
Yeah, you can't be cute. You got to play your game, the same game you played all season.
And that's where, if you're Michigan, you're looking at teams like, you're looking at some of the at least first half game plans that you've seen. You're looking at the fact that Marshall was hanging in there. You look at the fact that Northwestern hung in there. You look at the fact that even Indiana hung in there. Look at the entirety of the Nebraska game. Teams that had no business being with Ohio State suddenly found themselves in a game with them. If you're Michigan, you're looking at that going, okay, if we can get to that point, and that's a big if, but if you can get to that point, can you then settle yourself in there? And if you're Ohio State and Ryan Day, if you find yourself in a dogfight at halftime, if you find yourself in a dogfight in the third quarter, can you not let that mental game get to you and going, we're big favorites. We got to do this. We got to fake a punt here. Can you just play your game? If they can, if Ohio State can just go out there and play their game, the reality is I don't think Michigan can hang with them. But if you're Michigan, you're trying to instill those little seeds of doubt here and there that maybe come to fruition late in the fourth quarter.
100%.
Yeah, it's not going to go well, is it?
It's not. I'm letting you talk, but we both know.
Well, there's the reality between you throw the records out, but also the records are what the records are, because it tells you something about the way that both of these teams are on a trajectory.
You said it perfectly. In my mind, everything you said has to happen, and the chance of all three of them have to happen, not just two of the three.
Sure.
And the chances of all three of them happening are so slim.
If you're Michigan, that's the path. You have to do those things, and all three of them have to get checked. If you're Ohio State, you just need to stop one of those from happening. You just need to play your game.
You literally just have to play your game. The easiest thing you could do.
Let's talk stupid genius here as we wrap up. I tried to take Minnesota over Penn State, and they came up 1 point short, man.
Close.
I don't even remember who you had this past weekend.
It wasn't worth mentioning.
Who did you have?
I took Army over Notre Dame.
Yikes. My guy.
It was not good. I almost took Arizona State, though, and I wish I would have went with my gut.
That wasn't a 5.5 point spread, though.
It wasn't, but that's what I wanted to go with.
Well, because that one was easy, because nobody believes in BYU. All right. Stupid genius. I'm going to go first this week.
Okay.
I'm going to go first. I'm going to go with a team. You mentioned them earlier, a team that I have not believed in all season. And
I think we have the same one.
Did you take Syracuse over Miami?
Which is good news for you, because that means you'll win Stupid Genius for the season.
I hate this podcast.
The perfect timing. The flag comes down, and it's just
I hate this podcast.
Day. Oh, yeah, man.
No, I'm taking
talk good things about my guy Kyle McCord.
I'm talking my old friend Kyle McCord from last November. Love Kyle McCord.
Oh man.
I think I'm cheering for chaos. I don't buy Miami, and I don't buy Syracuse either. But it would be quintessential 2024 college football for a Heisman candidate and Miami team to go into that stupid little dome and lose a playoff game.
How dare you?
And lose a shot at the playoff.
And lose to a mascot that's a giant orange.
I just think that'd be
would
great.
just be supreme.
Hey, we will be in the shoe on Saturday. Make sure you follow at RivalPod, rivalpod.com as well. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you're curious, like, well, how does RivalPod like handle social media stuff on Saturday? Here, what we've done in the past is we've said, okay, very, very like limited, objective, insightful commentary during the game. Mm-hmm. And then whoever wins when that clock hits 0 gets to just go ham on it. Mm-hmm. That's how we've done it in the past. It's been a lot more fun in prior years. Like it's going to be at 3:30 on Saturday.
I've already blocked off my Saturday afternoon for some.
Me too. Don't call. Don't text. Don't beat me if you want to reach me. But be sure to follow at RivalPod for that. And again, you can support the podcast at rivalpod.com.
The Rivalry is a production of River Radio Ministries. Want live updates from the show? Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RivalPod. To learn how to support the show, shop our merch, and read our blogs, visit rivalpod.com. Make sure to follow us wherever you're listening now. And if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend so they can listen too.